like leading companies are investing money, they're buying tools, they're, equipping their employees in order to build a personal brand so that the company can benefit off of it.
This is wild that this is happening. I think we talked about it for a year.
Yeah,
no
feels
more.
Like it.
And about a year ago, I remember this so vividly. We both created our TikTok accounts on the same day.
Did we?
Yes.
Oh my God,
I noticed
I didn't even
because for me, creating a TikTok was a very iconic moment because I'm building community for so long, and there are a bunch of younger Gen Z women who were like begging me to get a TikTok. So for me to finally pull the plug on it was time.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, November 1st is the day I pull the plug and I do it. And naturally, when you're creating an account, you're like snooping around. Who else is doing stuff, talking about cool things? And I think you're one of the first accounts that I happened upon. And you also like just had a few followers, made literally your first video first day you got started, and I was like, I love her already. We're on the same page.
Love it.
We're figuring it out. And then literally a few months later, this girl has like 160,000 followers, and I'm like, I don't know how to make a video still. But I love that for you, and I've learned so much from you just watching your content, and now I'm just so excited to learn from you again, but now in person, which is so much more exciting.
I know. I'm honestly shocked to hear that it's been that long ago because it feels like it's been like a month, but yeah, time flies. It's been super fun, and I'm like stoked to be here. This is our first time meeting in person, having almost talked like a year ago.
I know.
Which is great.
Yeah, so very excited. Why don't you walk us through your career journey and how you got on TikTok in the first place?
My career journey has been much more of a squiggle than a straight line. I actually started my career in accounting. I studied econ and accounting. It was kind of like the choice that a lot of people in the major followed per, instruction from our professors. You just kind of like take the step that everybody else is taking. And I had never quite given myself the space to step back and think about, what do I like to do and what career paths are available to me based on the things that I know how to do. So I actually got my first job in audit at the Big Four, managed to stick that out for like just barely over a year before I very strongly knew that that was not the path for me and I needed to do something else. I found my way into executive recruiting, and that was kind of like my first glimpse into the tech industry and first like understanding of the corporate landscape. Recruiting is so interesting because you have to be at this bird's eye view of like all the different roles and how they work together. And I was getting to talk to these like very senior executive level people in deep technical products to hear about, their career goals, their experiences, the things that were super important to them. And I loved so much of that, but also felt that there were still things missing for what I wanted in my career. So that was my first entry into like this career HR hiring world. And then I, loved pieces of that, loved the relationship building aspect of it, but had always been driven by wanting to do something more creative, wanting to do something more project driven, and had this, long-standing subconscious interest in getting into marketing. So that kicked off a long concerted effort during the pandemic of trying to pivot my career, learn what I could about marketing, just kind of build up that foundational knowledge that you might otherwise get with a degree in marketing, the degree that I didn't have. And then was finally able to pivot from a recruiting role into a marketing role for a recruiting software company. So having that background as a recruiter gave me that, even though I didn't have that like practical marketing experience, it gave me that edge when applying as a candidate to a marketing role because, they wanted somebody that knew that customer. And so that was that's the role I'm in now. That is a really unique role because as part of the job, I have to be very deep in the hiring and recruiting content landscape. A lot of what my role revolves around is marketing to people looking for jobs and equipping them with the content and the resources that they need to be successful in that search. So as part of my own career pivoting experience and building up this expertise in this specific marketing role, I found myself becoming the go-to resource for friends. I was a student mentor for about a year or so, with a program for also girls looking to get into tech roles. And I felt like I had kind of access to a lot of knowledge that to me felt like it should be kind of common sense or just common practice for a lot of people looking for jobs. But I was finding in these conversations that wasn't the case. And, I would help my friends through salary negotiations and how do we manage 2 offers in this job offer process. So because of that, I felt like, I have this information that I know is so valuable to people. We were also 2 years or 3 years into a global pandemic and the job market was crashing. And, a year ago now, the market didn't look that dissimilar from what it does right now. Yeah. Sadly, it was layoffs were happening at peak levels to what they've been at in several years. Lots of people were on the job market. The job market has been more competitive than it's been in a very long time. And I saw an opportunity with social media. I feel like I've seen, as I'm sure you have, just so many people take to it to do more than just kind of the standard influencer thing, and people getting traction with sharing what they know on social media and actually being intentional about building a personal brand. And then I saw this bank of information that I thought might be valuable to start sharing with the world. So almost a year ago, November 1st, apparently, I posted my first video. I think it was about I know one of the early ones was about what to say when a recruiter asks your salary expectations. And yeah, just sharing that kind of information got traction so quickly. I think because the market was in the place that it was and people were so hungry for that type of information, to have it in bite-sized, consumable formats where they could then turn and apply it directly to their job search. So it's been a whirlwind. I still can't believe it's been a year. It's opened up so many incredible opportunities since then, and I feel like I've learned so much from it, and it's been incredibly complimentary to my career as a marketer as well. And I just love talking about it too. I think, defining your own career journey in a way that works best for you and is aligned with the things that you want in your career is the best investment you can make in your life.
Yeah, and all the stuff that you offer, it seems like common sense probably to you, but it's actually very gate kept.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why people are so hungry for that information, because it's simple in theory, but it's very difficult in practice. And I think a lot of your content is very actionable. It makes something that's simple in theory actually be simple in practice. And you can get paid more.
Yeah.
Obviously, that needs to be shared more and is super helpful, especially for women who really struggle to get paid equally to their male counterparts and stand up for themselves, talk about their wins in a way that can actually lead them to more money that they deserve because they're already doing that job. So you have beyond even just taking a full circle for, figuring out what you want to do in your career, but you're providing so much impact, especially for women. I'm sure your audience is not fully women, but I can only imagine how many women resonate with you specifically because you're a woman, and that's a real thing and that matters. Yeah. So I really feel like there's something really powerful as well about the lens you bring as previously a recruiter and then now working for a hiring software company, where these things are not things that we can just Google. It actually is you have it. And the fact that you're sharing it actually probably has changed so many careers, so many lives. And I can't even imagine how much feedback you get from your community about this. One thing that I often hear from my community is that they feel like they're at a huge disadvantage pivoting in their career, specifically.
It's hard.
It's really tough. And specifically, the fact that when you're coming from a place that doesn't have practical experience to apply to the next role, you kind of feel like you're entry level and you're a junior.
Yeah.
I actually believe that it's a superpower to have those different skills because you can actually lend yourself as a very unique candidate. And in the competitiveness of the job market right now, being very unique is actually very critical to even getting an interview.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear from you how you were able to tell that story as you were pivoting in your careers and painting yourself as actually the fact that I know something different is my superpower and it's not my disadvantage.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really interesting point. And I think it's There's advice here that can be applied to any job search, whether or not you're pivoting. I mean, if you're not pivoting and you can kind of figure out this angle for yourself, it'll make you more competitive regardless of what you're doing. But I think the best approach to going from point A to an entirely different point B is to figure out what that through line is. And so for my example, I went from being a tech recruiter into a marketing role for a recruiting software. That through line was that recruiting experience, because I was specifically looking into a company in this industry where that was their target customer. Having that intimate knowledge of being the target customer gave me that advantage that I may not otherwise have had if I was just any other marketer. So I've seen that commonality across, I think that can be applied in a lot of ways. Like if you come from a particular industry or you have a really core set of skills that, you're bringing to the table, like narrowing down the scope of your search so that it's more specifically focused on companies where that skill set or that industry background is going to be an asset will help you better tell that story. And then in your applications, in your networking, in whatever ways you're using to get in front of that company, you can more specifically tell the story about why you're a great fit for that specific company rather than why you're just a great marketer or product manager or whatever your role is. So it gives you that power to kind of tell that unique story that is showing like you this unique candidate and the company with this unique role have to be the perfect fit rather than general.
Totally. And as someone who hires all the time, I'm often very open to them not having a ton of experience in the role that I'm hiring for because a lot of these skills are very teachable and I'm pretty confident I can train them. But what I can't do is I can't magically create years of experience in recruiting, for example, or like maybe I want them to have a specific perspective about an industry, right?
Yeah.
I can't train them to have an opinion, have perspective. That just comes from years of experience. So I would actually rather take someone more junior in the role that I know is trainable if I can get that extra perspective. And so, like you said, really looking for those companies that are really focused on that extra perspective is probably how you can get away with having less experience. And I think that a lot of young people need to use that to their advantage because that's kind of how you break into industries, right? And it's especially so critical, the new grads who are graduating and like finding that the entry-level roles that were meant to them, they're now competing with people who have years of experience just because like the whole job market is so wonky right now. There's not enough jobs. And I think the part that people really struggle with, and I'd love to hear if you have any tips or tricks for this, is okay, I figure out my story. I know where I can have a unique advantage. It's these 5 companies. And now they won't respond back to me. Like, how do I get their attention, right? I think a lot of the times I talk about this, especially in my content, was like, it's about the numbers game. Email more people, apply to more jobs. Like, a lot of this is like, comes down to actually like creating luck. And that does come from like statistics and probability of, just throw a lot. But then, in this case, for example, maybe there's only like 5 or 6 companies that would really even consider me for what I have. What can I do to like make sure I get their attention?
Yeah. And I think this will depend on someone's situation. Like if someone's been impacted by a layoff and they're on the hunt for a job right now, like you may not want to set your targets on 5 or 6 companies. You may need to take a bit of a broader approach and apply to roles where your skills are going to be the most competitive candidate. But if you are in a position where, you do want to make a pivot and you can really take the long game approach for that, I think networking is a huge, huge asset, a great way to get your foot in the door with some of those potential companies. And I know when I was earlier in my career, like to me, networking meant showing up at conferences and like shaking hands with recruiters or passing out business cards or hitting up people when I like needed something right away. Since then, my perspective on networking has changed a lot to be that longer term approach and be more focused on building relationships. And if you have 5 companies on your radar that you think, your background in the recruiting industry or whatever it is would be a great fit, like start reaching out to people on the teams that you're interested in joining. hit them up for an informational interview. Ask them, if you can buy them a virtual coffee and pick their brain for 20 minutes and learn about what it is that they do in their job, what the, structure of their team is, like what different skill sets people bring to the table. This was a huge thing that I did when I was trying to pivot, was even companies aside, like I just really wanted to make sure I had a good handle on what people were responsible for in the roles that I was interested in, so that I could learn how to speak intelligently about those roles. And then, I would get on the phones with people. I would ask them about the tasks they were responsible for every day, the types of skills that were absolutely essential they would show up on day one of this job with, like the things that were easier to learn on the job that didn't need to be, they didn't need to have from day one. And that not only will give you kind of the toolkit to start telling your story about why you're a great fit for this role, because you know exactly what is needed in this role. It'll also give you this roadmap, this like personal development roadmap, so you can go close some of those skill gaps in order to get that direction. But then you'll also have the names and have relationships starting to be built with people that might potentially be influential to some of these hiring decisions. And if you can kind of keep them in your orbit and, continue to hit them up every so often and maintain those relationships, then that's when openings arise, when you see either they're hiring or they know of somebody hiring, like that's a warm lead essentially for your job search sales process that you can leverage.
No, that's for sure true. Basically, same thing when I was pivoting from engineering to product management. I did a whole round of like hundreds of informational interviews. And to be honest, those referrals I didn't cash in immediately. Yeah. It actually helped me just build a better understanding of my skill gap, like you said, and also how to eloquently speak as a product manager. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's very different. It's not something you can Google. Like actually the reps of talking to these people who are doing it in their day-to-day, like it would take 3 or 4 calls for some very obvious thing to click. I'm like, oh, that's what they mean. Or like, that's how I'm supposed to say it to not sound lame, Yeah. And that was so critical for my journey, because had I not gotten that, I probably wouldn't have nailed these interviews, even if the referrals went through. Like I would have flopped them. And the referrals is half the process.
Yeah.
And what you said, right, it's like, okay, if the 5 or 6 companies are my targets and maybe I can't play the numbers game there, okay, well, you can play the numbers game in the step before, right? Like cold reach out to so many people in that role so that you can really maximize there, and you can get maybe multiple referrals to one company, hoping one sticks, instead of it being like random, like 100 referrals that you need to get in order to like play the numbers game. So maybe like for someone else, the numbers game of like really spraying and praying is like how I call it, which I hate to call it. Maybe it's like
kind of what it is.
It really is, and that's sadly like the truth of the market that we're in. And I mean, yeah, it just at some point of the job hunt journey, you gotta hustle and do that hard work. Yeah. Like there isn't any shortcut. I think that a great way to forego that process is do the work up front when you're actually in a job. Yeah, really hustle on networking, because at any point in time you can get laid off, and everyone wants to accelerate in their career. Job hopping is really important, great way to get paid more. Like that's true, unfortunately. So yeah, everyone needs to network, because this is going to be reality for like everyone at some point in their career. Yeah. And if you like buckle down and you do it, passively when you're not stressed about, oh my God, I need a job tomorrow, I think the networking will be more effective, and you can probably spread it out into like something more manageable. When you do reach out to someone, though, I do feel like they do this quick glance of like looking at your online brand before they decide if they want to give you your time. And I think it's really important for everyone to have these strong personal brands. For us, I would say we have a very vocal, loud brand. Like we make so much content. It is an insane amount of time that we put in. But that's like not realistic for everyone. And I don't think everyone should have to feel comfortable on a camera just to like count and matter in the industry, right? So are there other strategies for people to really build a strong online brand without being like a TikTok creator, where even when they reach out for that coffee chat, they apply to a job, they can stand out when that person like looks them up online?
Yes, and I like can't preach enough about the power of personal branding. Like I feel like we're at this really unique time right now where social media, and social media is more than just Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, it's LinkedIn, it's Pinterest, it's blogging, it's so any like Discord, Slack, like it's anywhere that you can connect with other people via the internet. And we're at this really unique time right now where it's so powerful. Companies are investing super heavily into it in their marketing. Like there are big pushes from a marketing perspective for companies to enable their workforce to build their personal brands. Like leading companies are investing money, they're buying tools, they're, equipping their employees in order to build a personal brand so that the company can benefit off of it. So if you need any more convincing that like there's a reason to invest in your personal brand, I feel like there's not been a better time than now. As far as actually going about building it out, I think I've heard the unique perspective. I've heard a lot of advice on this topic, and I think like the value that you can share, let me think about how to say this. Like personal branding to me is sharing what you know with your unique perspective overlaid on top of it. So I think a lot of people think about personal branding or think about creating content from the mindset of like, okay, there's nothing I can say that hasn't been said before. I don't have anything original to add to a topic. But what makes personal branding and social media so unique is you think about creators that you follow or people that you tune in to hear from. Like you're tuning in to hear from them for the information that they're going to share, but also for their unique take on it, their unique perspective on whatever it is that they're talking about. And that's really, I think, what you can show up as when you're sharing. Like personal branding is really just about sharing what you know in a way that builds the image that you want to have in your career. So you're going to have a reputation in some regard, regardless of whether you're actively building a personal brand or not. Personal branding and the act of posting and sharing your perspectives and thoughts online is just about you taking hold of that reputation and directing it in the way that you want it to go. So, if you want to get started, like try posting once a week about something that you learned in your job or a problem that you worked through or some personal situation that relates to a topic at work or something that you're learning about outside of work. Like the more that you can just start putting out your perspective in a way that solidifies your expertise, the more powerful your personal brand will become to show you as an expert in that field.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you said take control of your personal narrative, and then you can literally paint a picture of how cool you want to be, how smart you want to be, like how connected you want to be. And ultimately, the point of putting out content is it increases your surface area of like the people that discover you. And what did we say earlier? We're like, a lot of this stuff is like chance.
Yeah.
Great way to manufacture your luck by spreading out your surface area, literally on the internet.
Yeah.
And I love that you mentioned all those social media platforms because like we're on TikTok. That's because what we're comfortable with. We like that. But there's so many other platforms that are text-based, that are more long form instead of short form. And it's really about what you said is like being comfortable because they're recruiters, they're employers, founders, creators. They're all everywhere, spread across, and obviously someone who's reading that, consuming your content in a platform that they are regularly spending time with versus us, you're probably going to resonate with them better, and it's probably a better fit for that connection, for that conversation or whatever. So that makes so much sense. I think there's also this, one level is like controlling your personal narrative online, but then controlling your personal narrative actually in the interview itself. I actually really struggle with that. I don't really do job interviews anymore. In fact, the last time I did a job interview was 2018.
Wow.
So like I'm definitely the worst
You're the
person
lucky
to
one.
Well, I mean, if I had job hopped, I probably would have gotten paid more. So I think, always practicing your interviewing skills and regularly like being open to new opportunities, even if you have the so-called dream job, because I really felt like I did have the dream job when I graduated college. Like that is actually like my number one biggest regret. And I think I just feared being forced to be put on camera and be like, tell me about yourself. Like, what? Like, why do you want to work at this company? Like, I don't. Like, that's the truth, right? So it's a little bit of like manufacturing a narrative that they want to hear and like being confident. Obviously, confidence is everything, right? Like, there's palpable energy and confidence, and if you can show up confidently in that interview, they're gonna feel more confident and you can do the job too. They won't even, it will be subconscious, right? And I would love to hear from you if there's anything you do to practice that confidence, practicing your interview. Like, how do we show up better?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really, like you said, practicing is a huge part of it. Like, there's a couple things at play. There's like interview skills, like how can you respond to interview questions and how can you craft your story. But I think especially for folks early in their career, there's also like, how do you show up when you're talking to somebody you don't know? Like, how confident do you feel navigating a conversation where you don't know where it's going to go and drawing on your expertise to in a confident and intentional way in that conversation. And I think that second piece you can build that confidence just through practicing, networking. Again, I'll preach it like every day. It's the best way to do that.
Yeah.
Hit people up on LinkedIn for informational interviews and aim for like one networking call a week, and you will build that confidence to talk to people in more senior positions than you and tell them about yourself and your background. As far as showing up to interviews with the intentionality around what you're talking about in response to interview questions, prep is your best friend. And I've really sworn by career coaching. I've definitely gotten a lot out of it. It's also something that you can like do a bit when you need the support and then let it go when you're not exactly like on the job search or really needing to make a transition. I think career coaching really gives you the frameworks that you can then leverage over and over again at different points in your career. But I would recommend, get a handle on what it is you want that elevator pitch career story to be. That's the kind of thing that you go take to your socials and you start sharing about and you start talking about to build that personal brand. And then that's also the way that you craft your narrative in an interview. And again, going back to what I said about personal branding, like it's not just, this is my expertise, this is what I've learned, but it's also, these are my values. This is like the unique perspective that I bring to the table as it relates to X, Y, and Z technical skill that I know how to do. And once you have a good handle on what that story is, like if you can bring those pieces together, that's going to be the thing that makes you sound more unique in the interview or in the networking conversation or when you're posting on LinkedIn, that pulls that whole story together.
Totally. I mean, practice makes perfect. It's cliche for a reason. Like there's no hack to this. And like you said, if you practice, you can have that confidence. And the reality is you can practice the elevator pitch and then tell them about yourself. And obviously that's going to help with the first few minutes of the interview because they're for sure going to ask that. But the rest of it is you have to lean on your instincts and you have to really trust that you know what you're talking about because you're never going to fully predict the questions that they ask. But and trusting that you have the intelligence and the experience to say something valuable in that moment. Like it just comes from practice and confidence, like you said. Yeah. I also really like that you mentioned career coaching because I've never done career coaching, but that sounds
I love
really
it.
helpful.
It's like therapy for your job.
And our job is like what we spend most of our week. Like why should we not normalize therapy around it? Like it literally makes sense. I feel like people would complain less about their jobs if everyone had this. And I almost want to encourage people if they're happy with their jobs and they're currently employed, like that actually is the time to do career coaching because then you can expense your employer. Yeah. And be like, professional development, you can easily justify it versus now you don't have a job and then you need guidance to navigate this period, but then you don't have money and then you're like, but like justifying career coaching, which is like the same reason why when we justify therapy, it feels like
don't just go when you have a problem. You should have it in your life. I mean, like I said, I don't think you need you can definitely get a lot of benefit out of going to career coaching once a week or once every 2 weeks for years at a time. But I think it's also good for those transitionary periods, whether that's dealing with interpersonal challenges at work or trying to advance in your career or make a career pivot or apply for jobs or have even just somebody to keep you accountable or motivated during the job search. Like it's I fully attribute my ability to pivot from recruiting to marketing to having a career coach and working with somebody that just kind of like helped me think through all the jumbled, stressed out, different pieces of information flying at me 100 miles a minute in my own head. So highly recommend it if anyone's feeling stuck. Like it was so helpful.
How do you recommend finding a good career coach?
I had just I had kind of like poked around online. I had worked with a service that let me do like 15-minute almost interviews with them to just get a feel for someone's style. I know for me, I really was looking for somebody that had a coaching style that I knew would work best for me. Like, I'm somebody that wants to be pushed. I want to be asked a lot of probing questions. Like, I really want to dig into the root of my challenge or what I was going through versus, not everybody has the same style. And the coach I ended up working with had a lot of frameworks that she brought to the table that could kind of, like I said, organize all those convoluted, stressed thoughts and decisions that I was needing to make. So that really resonated for me. I mean, I know the same can be said for coaching as it can for therapy. Like, you can interview your coach. If it's not a fit, you can move on to the next one. Like, it's a transaction. There's no hard feelings in it. It's about finding the person that brings the right style for what you need.
Yeah. There's a lot of TikTokers who are also career coaches. I'm sure you've stumbled upon that.
I have, yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's personal branding. Again, I personally am not a career coach. That's more aligned with like my interests and what I'm trying to pursue. I see so much power in social media for personal branding, especially if you are self-employed, like a career coach or consulting or doing any sort of business structure where you need to take on clients. And I've seen a lot of great content coming from the career coaches that are showing up on social media because, they're the ones that are talking to job seekers every day and hearing about those challenges that people are experiencing right now in this year's market. So if you found somebody online that you really resonate with, that you like what they're talking about, you like the way they talk about how they coach clients, like, absolutely go work with them, try it out. And if it doesn't work for you, move on to the next one.
Yeah, I love that you said that because I have also ability for people in my audience to book time with me. Mm-hmm. And in some ways it's career coaching because I can definitely bring career advice to the table. And a lot of my content is also about the job search and about, thinking about your career. So I definitely have the right experience to say something like that. But like, I would never bring a framework to the table, like that's not my style. My style is very much like, let me help you paint a good story and come up with a good strategy to kind of like, find that through line that you were talking about, or like, hey, I have just like a lot of experience in the field and I can tell you what the recruiter's thinking or like why this is not kneeling for you, but I'm never going to bring an organized framework to the table. And that's just my style. And I think people would get that very easily from my content. Like that's her vibe. Yeah. And I really like that you said that. It's really about connecting with that coach for what style works for you, because ultimately you need to do the work and you need to find that lightning bulb moment of like what's gonna stick for you, and if you don't connect with them, you're never gonna discover that for yourself. So
yes,
that makes so much sense. What about for like negotiating your offer? Like once you get the job and now it's time to like negotiate your salary, right? That's a whole level of expertise. And also, do you recommend coaching for that? To like, I think some people say like, oh, like through this coach, like I spent $1,000 on this coach, but then I got paid like $40,000 on my job. So like that was totally worth it, right? And I personally, I've never done that, nor do I offer that. So I'm a little bit skeptical, to be honest, but I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's definitely a lot less common from what I've seen, there's more career coaching out there than negotiation coaching. And I think a lot of career coaches can help with negotiations and kind of, framing the way that you want to ask for that increased offer. I've seen negotiation specific services too. I've actually worked both via TikTok and in my full-time role with negotiation services. I think it all just depends on like your circumstance. The ones I've seen are more applicable for people with like multi-$100,000 salaries that are trying to negotiate raises of like $50,000 or more, and they're paying like a percentage of that as a fee. So if you're earlier in your career and you're negotiating for like an extra $5,000, maybe you don't need quite that service at that point because the stakes are a little bit lower. But I think there's a lot, like I don't think you need it in order to negotiate your salary. I feel very strongly that you don't need to rely on somebody's paid services in order to negotiate your own salary with a potential employer, provided that you kind of have a handle on what you're going to go in and ask for going into that conversation. But, you know, if the stakes are higher, if you're really trying to negotiate a bigger package or you want advice on how to get specific benefits out of the deal, that's where I think coaching, both for negotiation or just generally, is more useful, you know, when there's very specific things that you're hoping to get out of the whole deal.
Totally. I mean, I think a lot of entry-level roles also have like fixed salaries you simply cannot negotiate. Like that happened for me in one of my first jobs. Well, I can also share a story about something that I did is like comical, so no one do this. I got my offer from LinkedIn, and obviously like crazy moment for me. Like I felt like I got my dream job. So they were like, whatever, congrats on you getting this offer. And I gasped out loud on the phone. I'm like, oh my God. And they're like, okay, we were going to offer you this much money, but seems like you're psyched to get the job. So like, we'll send you the offer. And they ended the conversation. And like, it was more money than I've ever seen in my life. So like, I was not complaining. Like, it was a great offer. But they were clearly calling to, you know, think I was going to negotiate. Yeah. I'm probably going to get paid a lot more. And I bet you my peers did, but I gasped out loud.
Oh, my God. I'm shocked they said that to you also.
I was like
dangling the carrot. And they're like, oh, you almost had it, but maybe next time.
I literally was like, oh, my God, that's insane. Like, out loud on the call, like, how embarrassing. But so don't do that. That's like
for leverage sake. You can be excited. Hang up the phone and then go scream after that.
Yeah. So I guess like you said, you know, I think the hardest part is actually when you're junior, you're going for your first promotion. I think advocating for yourself was really hard. I think that's where the like big gaps come in between you and your peers and what you get paid. I remember this didn't happen to me, but two peers at the company that I was working at, same role, same age as me, they both told me their salaries separately. They hadn't communicated with each other. There was almost like a $60K difference. And I bet you it had to do with that promo conversation. I bet you it did not have to do with the fact that one was much better than the other or more valuable. So like, what can we learn from that? Like, how do we navigate those conversations? I was kind of like on my way out after I got promoted. I feel like I actually similarly did a video talking about like my promo, and I got promoted for so much money, like honestly without trying that much, because I was just so thorough about, you know, documenting the work that I did. I was doing this simply to build my own portfolio on the side, and I was like not thinking. But then at the time of the promo, they were like, okay, like sell yourself, why we should pay you more. And at this time, I was pretty much on the way out. So I was like, okay, like how do I do this doc in the least amount of time? Because I'm like not trying to say like stay years and like don't really care. But I'm not trying to leave like right in this moment. So like let's go through the process. And I basically was like, well, I already have this portfolio that I created for myself. Let me just literally dump this and like send off the doc. And I got promoted so much from that. I was like, oh my God, this is the hack. But in practice, like it's a lot to like do all this documentation. And I actually think if I had employed more strategies and had more like structured conversation, I bet you I could have got promoted for so much more than that. So I'm curious like what tips you have.
Promotions are so interesting, and they get even more complicated and political the more senior you get. But I think promotions and even just like professional development within your company is a process that you should be thinking about year round. I've heard the advice. I resonate with the advice that like it's in your interest to start to be seen almost as like an advisor to your manager, or put yourself in conversations with them where you're asking about the problems that they're trying to solve. The step number one to getting promoted or getting a raise or advocating for more in any circumstance in your company is to understand what's in it for the company and why they're going to benefit from giving it to you. And a good way to do that, if you don't have clarity on like the team's goals or the broader company's goals, is to start to have those types of conversations with your manager where you're asking them about the things that they care about. What challenges are they trying to solve? how does my goal as a marketer on this team fit in with the broader goal of our entire marketing team? How does our marketing team's goals fit in with the goals of the broader company? And the key to getting promoted is being able to make the case as to why the work that you've accomplished has helped to push those goals forward, and to be able to even quantify what that tangible impact was. And so that's step one. I think, like, I love the practice that you had of documenting everything, because that's going to be the easiest way for you to go and actually make that case. I'm a champion of this idea of called like a brag book. It can be whatever format you want it to be, even just keeping like
wins folder.
Yeah, exactly. Wins folder. I think keep a Google sheet that breaks down month by month the projects you're working on, the tasks that you've been assigned to, the broader goal that they relate to, the results of that project, any feedback that you got as a result of that project, both positive and negative, because if there's negative feedback, that's an area of opportunity for you to improve and develop, and that's something you can point to say, look how much better I've gotten at this thing. That's not only going to help you make the case for why you should get promoted or why you should get a raise, but that's going to be a really handy document when you go to look for a new job and you're trying to remember all the things that you've done. And suddenly you've got this beautiful spreadsheet that you can use to practice for all your interviews. So keeping that on hand is like amazing for advocating for a promotion. I think promotion is all of your career is a long game. Like, that's why I love talking about it so much, is because it's something that you should be thinking about all the time. But to have conversations early and repeatedly with your manager will help them think about, your areas of improvement, any gaps that you need to close. It can help them keep you in mind for like new projects. If you do need to take on new, types of work or show that you have certain skills in order to hit that next level. And then it'll help them keep you in mind when you're not in the room and like these conversations are happening. If you're continuously expressing, I want to move to this next level, these are all the things I've accomplished, these are all the ways that I've grown, these are all the ways that I've added value and impact to my company, and you're constantly like reiterating that to them, it's going to make it really easy for them to then go regurgitate that in the rooms where those decisions are happening. So it's a long game. You don't want to, be talking about it in every single conversation with them, but there's a way to do it. There's a way to like set a monthly check-in to check in on your personal KPIs, your career KPIs, so that you're proving this development having happened. I think another thing I'll call out just on the topic of raises is like there is value in taking external calls and external interviews, even if you're not looking for a job, because you brought up like pay discrepancies in an organization. You found out that your peers are making $60K more than you. Like if you're taking calls with recruiters when they're reaching out, whether or not you're actually serious about moving on to a new role, that's probably some of the best market data around what you specifically could get paid elsewhere, like what your skills and experience is worth. And there is no greater piece of leverage to negotiate for a raise at your company than an offer in hand that says, you know what, this company right here is ready to pay me $30,000 more than what I'm making. What do you guys think about that? Let's work this out together and let's see what common ground we can come to, because, I really like this job and I want to continue to grow here. So
yeah,
lots of ways, lots of approaches. It's a strategy, but you think about it intentionally and it pays dividends.
And for a company, it costs way more than $30,000 to deal with that turnover, open a new job reg, get their HR team on board. Like, if they actually fear that you're going to leave, they feel that risk. You literally are putting an offer letter in front of their face. Like, you have tangible proof, like, you're going to leave tomorrow.
Yeah.
They're going to buckle down. They're going to get you that.
Yeah.
A story I've never said anywhere, I'll say it now, is when my manager got whisper that I was leaving, I actually got promoted again. And, I still left because, for me, I had a goal. It was not about money. But, yeah, if they will do I didn't even ask for money. I was like, you know what? I'm probably going to head out. This is my calling. It was very much of an honest, transparent conversation. And then I somehow randomly, coincidentally, started getting paid more. And they were like, by the way, we're bumping your salary, but like keep thinking about it. And it's like, oh, coincidentally?
Yeah.
Like,
They're like, no, we need to keep the high value people. And that's exactly it. Like the chances high that if they were to rehire somebody, it would probably be at this new salary because like we've proven with this new offer, like that's the market rate for it. Granted, like there is some extent of, you know, if you're making this case for a raise, for a promotion, like you do need to be a high performer in that role. You do need to be proving, as I'm sure you did, that you're adding value, that you are somebody that they don't want to risk losing, which is why those developmental conversations with your manager are so important so that you know where the gaps are and what ways you need to be improving on a regular basis. Because if your goals, unfortunately, if your goals are not aligned with the company goals, like if the things that you want out of this job or this career are not aligned with the things that are going to make the company money, like they're not going to have the incentive to pay you more because they're not going to get anything out of it. And at the end of the day, it is just a business transaction.
Yep. Totally. I mean, the reality is for every dollar they spend on you, you have to literally 10x that dollar. Mm-hmm. So if you're asking for 30, 40K more, like think of the 10x of that. You actually have to have that much impact on the business. Ask yourself, like, are you really doing that? And more importantly, actually ask yourself, can you showcase that you did that or can do that, right?
Yeah.
Like I think it's really about demonstrating that, right? Like maybe you actually are, but if you don't demonstrate that and actually confidently showcase that through metrics, like you said, and that's where the brag folder becomes really important because it's really difficult to pull these little numbers from everywhere and then like sum it all up and be like, this is how much money I make you, right?
Yeah.
It's really critical to have the conversations. When I was, you know, moving towards my promo, I had a monthly check-in with my manager and she was really great. She had this structure. It was, what's one thing you want to start doing, what's one thing you want to stop doing, and what's one thing we want you to continue doing. And we would do it on each other. And it would kind of keep each other in check of like, how can I help her improve as a manager and how can she help me improve as an employee? And I think a lot of people complain that they have bad managers. This is a great way. Have this like very simple framework.
Yeah.
They simply cannot be a bad manager. They just have to answer the question.
Yeah.
And so we would both come prepared with this and we would say one thing for each thing. And then at the end of the meeting, I would have 3 tangible action items to do that month, which is one thing I need to stop doing, continue doing, and start doing. And it was very simple to now go and do actionable things coming away from it versus being here's vague advice, you should like be more communicative or you should just be more something, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, how, right? And then you get stuck in that like trap versus a structure really like makes it very easy for a manager to be like, okay, you can start posting in Slack more, you know, and it's like, great, that would help. That's very easy for me to do. Just literally talk more in Slack. And these things actually make a huge difference in how people perceive you and how your work is demonstrated, which is like so critical in like promotion. I want to talk more about, you know, job hopping, especially because that is so tied to getting paid more. Do you have a framework for how you think about job hopping? You know, when should we leave, especially when it gets very easy to feel comfortable in a job. And even when at times we are like, you know what, this doesn't really feel right for me anymore. But like the idea of like hopping is so much work. It's better for me to stay here, right? So how do you ask yourself those questions a moment and know when it's the right time to leave? And not just for money, but also for personal fulfillment of like, okay, at every day in my career, like I'm in the best place for me.
Yeah. And it's a very interesting question. I think the answer looks a little bit different for everybody. I think there's so many different pieces to it. Like there are people that, you know, are professional development driven, like hungry to do more, learn more, take on more, accomplish more. There are people that are where a career serves a specific place in their lives that enables them to do things more external from work. And I think even before deciding whether it's time to leave or stay at a job is getting clarity on like the role that a career plays for you in your life. That's going to look different totally depending on where you are. Like you and I are people earlier in our careers. We don't have kids. We don't have these responsibilities that demand certain things outside of our day-to-day jobs. So there's more freedom to, clamor at the things that feel fulfilling, to build that career, to really focus on that skill development. I think for a lot of people, like, success in a career looks different depending on what those goals are. But I like to think about my place in my job as whether I am earning or learning, because really at the end of the day, like, we're working to get a paycheck. We're working because we have to pay to live. We have to pay to do the things that we enjoy doing. We have to pay to build this life that we want. And the career, whether you're working for yourself, whether you're working for a company, like, that's the thing that facilitates us. It's awesome to be in a corporate environment where you have the luxury of getting to, like, work on problems that are inspiring and getting to build skills that are things that you, like, feel passionate or motivated by. But for some people, like, the focus is more on earning and facilitating that lifestyle. So step number 1, get acquainted and get comfortable with, what role does the job play for me right now? What do I need the most out of it? Whether that's income, whether that's skill development, whether that's networking, whether that's opportunity. Having that North Star can be a really good way to decide if it's time to move on to something new. And if I think about it, like, I know for me personally, like, I'm at a stage where I think that skill development is really important. Like, yes, the paycheck is huge. I mean, no, the paycheck is not huge. The paycheck is very important. But I want to make sure that, like, I'm setting myself up for success in the direction that I decide I want to move later in life. So making sure that I'm in an environment where I'm getting to take on new responsibilities and getting to learn new skills is something that I want to orient around. I expect that I'll reach a point later in my career where I'm pretty established in what I know how to do. I'm pretty comfortable in the skills that I've built, and maybe I don't want to continue to become more senior. Maybe I want to go out on my own and consult or be a freelancer or work in a more flexible structure. So, if I get to that point, I'll need to think about what skills I need in order to do that. And is my current situation or my current job helping me build those? Is it setting me up for that kind of end goal that I've decided? There's a really interesting framework that I learned about recently. It's called the circular growth framework as opposed to the linear growth framework. And I think we, in our, scholastic upbringing and going through school and college and climbing the traditional career path, get trained in this very linear model where you're always focused on taking the next step, going to the next level. You kind of move up in this straight fashion. And the idea of the circular career growth framework is that each action you take is informed by the reflection on the previous action. So rather than just moving linearly one step after another, you're making a decision and then having this really active process of reflection on that decision in order to decide where you go next. And I bring that up because I think that's a great way to think about career pivots. Like I said, there's not one answer of when should somebody look for a new job. It's going to depend on the person, but every time you work on a project at work, every time that you meet somebody new in your network, every time that you get a promotion or you take a new job, like, having that reflection process about what that means for you in terms of your goals, your skills, your income, your opportunity, and then using all of that information to decide, like, okay, what is my next goal? Like, do I want to stick it out here and get promoted? Do I think that finding a new job would be the right path for me? If so, what should that new job be? Maybe I want to go out on my own, like, whatever it is. That can be something that is constantly evolving as you're getting more experience and taking on more and more, and isn't going to have the same answer throughout your entire life because you're always using that information to adjust, redirect, and that ensures that you're, like, orienting yourself towards a goal that you resonate with the most.
Yeah, I mean, I call this career eras. We're in different eras, so you got to do different actions according to it, and reflection is a critical part of understanding what era I'm in, what action do I need to take, am I heading into my North Star, and continuing to ask yourself, is my goal the same as it was last year? Maybe not, right? I think generally, like, it should be early in your career, you should optimize for learning, like you said, and then more in your later in your career, when you really perfected and become a master of your skills, then you optimize for earning.
Yeah.
And like you said, maybe it's being the VP in your role and like leading a huge team, or it's freelancing and being able to charge a lot of money to clients because you have built this expertise in a field. And or maybe it's like neither. Maybe it's like, I just want to really focus on being a mom. And like, that's my era that I'm in. And that's also so fine. And then you're optimizing for maybe work-life balance because you just want to be. And I really think that there's no right answer. But the wrong thing is like not reflecting on it and not thinking about, what era are you in and how to like accurately frame your life around optimizing for that goal. So I love that example that you gave. And I think for us as women, it's a lot more complex, and I think it changes a lot faster and much more rapidly. And so I think, further I would emphasize women to continuously reflect and reconsider their values because, yes, it will change. My values when I was 22 is very different.
Yeah, and just like what's important in your life, too, at that time.
Totally. Another really hot topic here is like equal pay for equal work. And as women, this is obviously something we struggle with, right? Like oftentimes we'll find our male counterparts who are doing the same amount of work as us, they just get paid more. And I feel like there is an element of, women are less vocal and they advocate for themselves less. And I often see that we take on more work because we feel like it's our duty to do it. And I would be curious if there's any like advice that you have or any like, things that you've practiced in your job to ensure that you're getting paid fairly, but more importantly, that you're not taking on extra work that isn't actually lending you into a promotion or lending you into a next job.
Yeah. It's very tricky. I think there are going to be companies that have great practices around this, and there are going to be companies that don't and are not going to be super receptive to raising it as an issue. I think like going back to the idea of having those regular development conversations with your manager and getting like if you're in a company that doesn't have a good practice of setting developmental goals for everybody, clearly defining when promotions are warranted, clearly defining where your scope of work starts and ends, that can be something that you bring to those conversations. Those can be boundaries that you establish with your manager. And I think that starts with the clarity on the goals. What am I specifically hired to achieve in this role? What does success look like for me? And even if you've been in the role for a year, a couple of years, like you can still bring these conversations up. I just want to make sure like it's almost the end of the year. We're going into 2024. I'd love to realign and make sure that we're both on the same page about what the goals for this year look like and what success will be. It's a lot easier to make a case around a raise or promotion pointing to metrics and saying, I hit 120% of quota, or I brought in like 105% of our leads goal or whatever it was. I think so that's one approach I would take, is just really getting the clarity internally with your role about what's expected of you so that you can show that you're exceeding that. The other approach I would say, again, is to look externally and like keep that pulse on the market. There are tons of data sources to do this. There's like the market salary aggregators like a Glassdoor, salary.com, PayScale. I think those are the best to get context around kind of like the broader ranges that you might expect in a certain role or industry. I don't think they're like the best thing to take as gospel for like, this is the exact salary I need in my role. Another approach is, like we talked about, interviews, taking external interviews, trying to hear from recruiters what their budget is. If you get all the way to an offer, like having that as leverage. There are conversations with peers. Like you can go, as part of networking, if you're building those more transparent relationships that are not connected to a specific job, and you can build that rapport to a point where you feel comfortable to talk salary with somebody. Like if anyone listening to this is in a position to talk about salary with anybody else, I highly encourage it. I think it's one of the best things that people can do for transparency's sake. But if you feel uncomfortable about, asking somebody outright what their salary is, if you have a network or relationship built with somebody in your industry, somebody in a similar role, take a job offer or a potential opportunity or even your own current role to them and ask, based on your experience, what would you expect a role like this in this industry at this level to pay? Like based on how your company works or other roles you've seen, like, does this number sound right? Does it sound low? Does it sound high? Do that with 10 people and you'll have 10 data points about whether you're getting paid fairly or not. As far as internally, like how to bring it up in your role, I think there's no silver bullet. Some companies will be receptive and listen, and others won't. If you can build a case both around, I've added this value in this way, I've had this impact, I've developed this far, my scope has grown this much. Also, all of this market data says that the fair value rate for all of this impact is X dollars or, however many thousand more dollars than what I'm making now. Like that can be a pretty compelling way to make a case to get a raise. Some companies will honor it, some won't. And if they don't, that's where you go back to that reflection that we were just talking about, earning or learning or whatever is the North Star for you at the moment, and say, is this a place that is giving me what I need, or can I get something more by going somewhere else?
Yeah, I think that's great advice. There's a lot of salary transparency videos out on TikTok now, and obviously, like, look at that for guidance, but it's really difficult to know the full picture from that video. Like, they're sharing what they want to share selectively, and there's, like, maybe they're working at a startup and like it just looks so different versus they're working at, a tech company versus a non-tech company. Like there's so many factors like this that, impact a role. And so I think use those videos as guidance, but I think you're, using the tools that you mentioned, which I didn't even know those were things, by the way, that's helpful for me to even know. Like that's like definitely like more accurate and more of something that you can actually bring a compelling argument to the table. I'm like, okay, this is like what reasonably makes sense. But I mean, I think the sad truth is that realistically, like you said, we probably just have to do more interviewing, and we probably have to have more of this compelling case of like, well, I could get paid this much here, and like, and keeping our pulse on like what the market rate is. And I hate to be like, oh, like in order to compensate, women have to just like hustle harder to get like more practice and like more offers on the table. But sometimes, like, that is the reality, and I do think that when you're balancing other factors like work-life balance and also, stage of career and learning potential, like, maybe it is taking sacrifices in your salary for those things, and it's, again, back to the reflection of, like, okay, what era in your career are you in? Like, is that the right moment for you right now to do that or not? I think that I'm very pro, like, constantly optimize for learning at no matter what stage of your life that you are in, because ultimately the skills that you learn make up who you are. And it's not an accident that you're able to pick up TikTok and like have such a great impact on your audience and like be able to grow so fast. Like that's not a year of effort. That's like 10 years of effort, right? Because you're amassing this knowledge in your head and you're coming at it with an expertise and a background that actually is compelling enough for people to want to listen to see what you have to say, and you're bringing unique insight that like not, these regular creators are talking about. So it's always better to optimize, I think, for learning sometimes, because things like side hustles, potentially freelancing in the future, having more autonomy of time comes because you put in the work to like build unique expertise and have that unique perspective, which doesn't come for free. It comes from like sometimes trade-offs, like taking less money. And I think we're also moving into a world where freelancing and side hustles and the gig economy is like becoming much more prevalent. And I'm finding so many more younger people not taking full-time jobs because they're like, hey, like I can make way more money just doing my own thing on the side. And I don't think that was a reality for us when we were graduating college. Like the best way to make money was to take a job. Like it was not running around town, like trying to do your own thing. And I remember really thinking about this deeply when I graduated because I wanted to be a founder like since I was 14. Like I've always known. So graduating and taking a job was like a very intentional decision. It was like I was delaying my dreams that I like went to college for and like I knew. So it was like this heavy thing I had to do. But the reality of the situation is that was the best thing financially for me to do. And I was like, you know what? I'm still going to learn so much. It's not a waste of time. And it was not a waste of time. Like I use so much of that knowledge now. But I wonder if like I was graduating now, would I even look for a job with the opportunities that are available today? So one, do you have any thoughts on that? And two, like you're doing that now with the full-time job. Yeah. And how do you balance that?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And kind of going back to what I was saying about, so, and I'm talking about social media specifically. There are so many other ways to work for yourself too. But with the rise in social media, with the investment that is happening into social media, with the power that comes with building a personal brand, like I feel like there's so much potential for people that are interested in doing that in a way that can be really complementary to your career. I mean, there are tons of social media accounts where you could argue that it has nothing to do with that person's career. But like if you have a desire to build a corporate career journey or a career in which you are working for somebody else, social media can be a really powerful way to amplify that if you think about that from the beginning and do it strategically. Like I'm still definitely defining, where do I want to go? I've found my footing in marketing. This TikTok account is a great way for me to build that marketing experience while sharing my knowledge. But, if like another avenue that probably could have been a great avenue for me would have been to start building some sort of brand around being a marketer and sharing marketing expertise. And that's a way to become really known as that expert in that space. And then you also have the side hustle opportunity where you can make income and have it as this secondary source, secondary income stream that in a market like this where there's so many layoffs, there's not a lot of job security, like having that cushion, that safety net if something happens and you are without a corporate job can be a really, really powerful thing. Like that can be a life-changing thing. If somebody gets laid off and it takes them 6 months to find a job, like having a secondary source of income can make the difference between taking a job that gets them closer to the career goals they're trying to get to or taking just the first job that comes across their plate because they have bills to pay. And that's the only option.
So true. A lot of people get uprooted from their homes and their lives because they can't pay rent in a certain city. And by taking a wrong job, like you said, because you really need to like get money in the bank, you could maybe delay your career like 5 years. Like it's drastic. Yeah. So you're right. It is that powerful.
Yeah. Or even just there's data that shows the like compounding impact of taking a $5,000 lower salary earlier in your career can result in, I don't want to skew the numbers, I don't know the exact stat, but like thousands and thousands of dollars later in your career just because you've started at that slightly lower place. So even in that type of situation, I also think that like taking on a side hustle can be a great way to build experience, not only like to be seen as an expert in your niche, but even if, like personal branding aside, even just taking on side projects as a way to build expertise can be something that like A, you get paid for, and B, you put on your resume to help you land that corporate job. Like if you're fresh out of college and you're finding the job market is disastrous and you can't land anything, I always preach side projects. Like that was one of the big ways that I was able to pivot into marketing, was taking all of this marketing learning that I had done and applying it to a side project. I essentially built out like a full marketing plan for a company that never ended up getting started, but because I had done that, I put it on my resume and I said that I was a co-founder, and I talked about it exactly as it was in the interview, and that was enough to legitimize this like all this learning that I had done in order to move myself into a marketing career path. So there is a balance. Like, time is your greatest asset. There is a balance with working a full-time job and doing something on the side. And not every job is going to necessarily allow for that, both like policy-wise and capacity-wise. But if that's something that's important to you, that's something that you can test for in an interview, you know, making sure that they're open to people having a second source of employment. There are healthy boundaries around when your day starts and ends and the amount of work that you take on. Like, if you've got that capacity, I absolutely think that pursuing a side hustle is an amazing thing that you can focus on, just for the income it can provide, for the flexibility it can provide if your career goes in a direction that you're not planning on it doing, and just the skills that it can add to your resume on top of what you're getting out of a full-time role.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I would almost even argue that it would be impossible to lay you off because you have such a big platform in their niche now that you could just fully destroy them.
Should tell that to my boss.
and not only that is, like, every day that you're investing in this side hustle, you become better at your job and you bring all these new skills to the table that they can learn from you. And you're now probably, I'm sure, becoming a thought leader at your company on this topic. And that makes you so much more powerful and so much more harder to replace.
Yeah.
And ultimately, layoffs just come down to, like, getting rid of the people that are replaceable. And this is just a great way to become invaluable at your company, which I think reality is, not only is it really important for the market, but I mean, AI is coming. We're not going to, like, pretend that's not a thing, right? And I don't think that AI is going to take our jobs, but it does have potential to make you more replaceable.
Yeah.
And so building those skills and also not being afraid of AI and, like, learning it and incorporating in your job are ways to make yourself, like, more valuable. And then in some ways that is bringing you more job security. So
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you're totally doing that. Did you have to talk to your employer about this before you started the account?
I didn't bring it up before I started. I did read my, like, job offer and my whatever employment agreements I had agreed to when signing all of that, just to make sure, you know, there weren't any clauses about secondary employment. When I also started it, it was just a social media account. Like, it took a few months for it to turn into actual income. And I had confidence that what I was talking about was so aligned with the mission and values of my company that there wouldn't be concern with it. But it's also been, like, it is kind of a tricky thing to navigate too. Like, it's very public, you know, everyone in my company has seen it. I do have to kind of accept the fact that, like, that is an aspect of my reputation at work, and that's something that people will come to think of me about, whether or not it's related to my job. And I think that's going to be true for, like, whatever you're talking about on social media. It can be entirely separate from your corporate persona, but if you're sharing anything on a public platform, like, it will be something that people will come to associate you with, for good or for bad. So something to keep in mind, like, if you are pursuing that corporate career, your socials are an extension of your personal brand. Totally. And I think we've grown up with social media in this gray area way where, like, that wasn't always the case. Like, I remember when Instagram first came out, and it was like the photo editing app that you would post prom photos, like, and only your friends could see it. And now it is something so entirely different. TikTok was not a thing when I was in college. And so it really is this, like, extension of your personal brand, and I think should be viewed in that way when you're thinking about, like, what you want to talk about on it and what you want to share on it.
Do they say in meetings, like, oh, let's ask Hanna, like, she's the TikTok queen?
You know, it has come up. Being on marketing is good because I feel like it gives me a little bit of cred. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure it'd be interesting to see how it, like, what that would be like on other teams. But again, like, going back to what I said, if you are leveraging it to brand yourself as this expert in your role, like, that translates to your team and you start to be seen in that way. Like, I have a call set up tomorrow with our social media marketer who wants to chat more about like social media strategy. Like we've had a couple brainstorming sessions to just think about different perspectives of how our company thinks about social media. I've, worked with our marketer who has done our own content collaborations with influencers just to kind of be that perspective from the other side of the table. So even like the same way that I was talking about having been a recruiter and that being valuable experience moving into a recruiting software company as a marketer, like having built this expertise on social media and knowing how the different, like the TikTok algorithm works and how you can kind of talk to an audience and craft content, that's kind of been my through line into my actual marketing role, which has been great. I mean, yeah, it's served me well, I think, so far.
Do you feel like because now you're the expert on this topic, it's almost like you have to now be pulled into more meetings and get more of your time? Or do you feel like instead you've been able to demand like more money for that extra time that they're asking you for?
I would say neither at this point. I've intentionally kept it fairly separate. I think if I wanted to move more in a social media marketing direction, I probably could make a good case to. But I feel like I've been much more interested in like marketing strategy overall and being the strategist between marketing channels. And to me, social media is such a powerful channel to do so that I'm kind of like building that toolkit and using that to solidify that like strategist experience. I don't feel like I've been tasked with enough yet at work to warrant like requesting a raise for it, but that's part of that's intentional where, I'm trying to keep it fairly separate. I like the fact that social media is this autonomous thing that like I own and I don't report to anybody. I can make my own decisions around. Like I'm trying intentionally not to muddy the waters too much between the two.
That's just you being like intuitive up front, like, hey, I'm gonna put up these boundaries. Like I know where this can go. Like I think a lot of the times we forget to put up those boundaries and then we get taken advantage of. Yeah. And we realize after it's over. Yeah. And we're like, sorry, well, it's done now.
And I've had transparent conversations with my manager and my manager's manager, and like especially because the subject matter is so similar. Like I do brand partnerships on TikTok, and sometimes brands approach me where I'm like, is this a competitor? Like, is this chill if I work with them that's independent of my full-time role? And, nothing's been direct enough that it's been an issue, but like I've gone to my manager and talked to her about it and said, cool. I just want to run this by you. Like, I don't want to cross any lines that I don't know are there. Let's set the lines. Let's figure out what they are so that everybody's happy with how this is going. And like I can be confident that I'm fully showing up for these brands and doing my best work over here. And I'm not sacrificing anything on this full-time work side of the table. And she's super supportive. Like, again, because the subject matter is so similar, like it is beneficial to have people in the company that know this much about the hiring market and have that subject matter expertise built up. But so far it's been working out pretty well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Have they ever asked you to do a brand deal for them?
We've kind of danced around the subject. We haven't quite gotten there, but I feel like, whether we're owned by a bigger parent company, it's a much bigger brand, and we've toyed with the idea of maybe doing something on a broader scale for them, but nothing quite yet.
Oh my God, so exciting. Would you ever do TikTok full time?
Oh, it's everyone's favorite question.
I know. Saved it for last for a reason.
I know. I've thought about it. I think, like we said, like it has not even been 1 year yet. And I decided earlier on into this year that I wanted to give myself the grace of just seeing where things went this year before making any planned decisions about where I want it to go. I, again, love that it's this safety net thing for me that, like, if I reach a point in my career where I'm ready to move on from this role, or if I get laid off, or if I'm in or if I want more flexibility in my life and I don't want to be working 40 hours a week, like I love that I have this as something to fall back onto. And if it becomes a full-time thing, it means that I can like really build it out and build out across more channels. I'm not cutting it out, like saying no to the idea entirely. It's not my like end all be all goal at this moment, but I feel that it's so complementary to like the marketing work that I'm pursuing that I like having it in my corner, so that, you know, if the opportunity arises, if it is the thing that makes the most sense for me based on all that reflection and that context of my life at a given point, like I can go all in on it if I want to.
Totally. I think that makes so much sense. You're keeping your options open, which is like the best thing to do. And ultimately, we're almost moving to a point where building a really strong personal brand and having an audience is becoming like complementary to a lot of things rather than standing alone, like complementary to running a business or complementary to being better at your job or like getting exposed to like better opportunities, getting paid more, having that side income, right? And so I think this idea of also being a full-time content creator is going to change a lot in the next few years. And I mean, I don't know the answers, but I'm like very curious about it. Yeah. And I think there's so much we can do once we build an audience outside of just full-time content creation to leverage for, you know, doing our own things or having more autonomy or like say at our jobs, where I'm really excited about that era. And I believe that for the first time we actually have a chance at having equality in the workplace for men and women, because let's be real, women are really good at this thing. We're good at showing up on video. It's natural for us. And that might be your in. So I'm really excited to see what that looks like for us. Last question, I ask all my guests this. Yes. If you could go back in time and tell your younger self some advice, what would you tell her?
Oh, this is an easy one because I have been reflecting on the advice I would tell myself for so many years. But the one regret, and I hate to even call it a regret, but like really if I could do anything differently about being early in my career, it would be to explore as many opportunities as possible. I landed in accounting basically knowing that it wasn't the thing I wanted to do because I had not taken the space to try on all sorts of different things. I had a job offer in hand and I was like, you know what? That's the goal, right? Everyone's here trying to get a job after college. I'll take it. But I had this time, especially in college when you can take so many classes and you can have 3-month internships or work a job for a month, and it like arguably doesn't matter that much in the long scheme of things, that, you know, having just tried on different classes, different topics, different jobs, and paying attention to like what resonated with me the most, I feel like I could have really accelerated my career to get to the point I am in now. And who knows where I would be had I done that many years ago. So trying on all sorts of different things is the best thing you can do when you're early on and you've got the flexibility to do so.
Yes, 100%. I fully agree. Well, thank you for coming.
Of course. This was so awesome. Oh I'm glad we did this. I learned
so much more. A lot of job tips that I don't need, but I know the community is going to be hyped to hear.
You might be surprised when they come up at some point. Being a founder is a job of itself.
So true. And a lot of these tips, I think about them when I like give a tip for a job. I'm like, okay, I'm going to use that in like my investor call, my sales call, and like for sure.
Personal branding, I mean, that's everything. That'll take you anywhere you're going.
Take you anywhere, yes. Maybe that's the title of this episode.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much again.